Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Conqueror of Shiketsu, by Alice Blackwood 7575. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin Chapter 1, A Declaration of War. Things were looking up for the first-year hero Class 1A. Finally, their nightmare had come to an end. The League of Villains was no more after the intense battle at Kamino Ward. All Might had defeated All for One for good, putting an end to his reign of terror. Shigaraki, Kurojiri, and Dr. Garaki, the man behind the creation of the Nomus, were all incarcerated. Although some of the other League members, like Toga and Dabi, had managed to escape, the hope was that they would eventually be apprehended. Crime was on the rise since All Might had been pushed to his limit during the battle and was now retired. Fortunately, his successor was training tirelessly to become the next symbol of peace. For the time being, Class 1A enjoyed a rare moment of tranquility. Most of the students had passed the provisional license exam, with Bakugu and Todoroki finally earning theirs. Their work studies were complete, and they had delivered an amazing performance at the cultural festival. For now, peace reigned over Class 1A. But good things can never last. It was now December, and Class 1A, along with Class 1B, were about to begin a joint training exercise. The air was filled with a mix of excitement and anticipation as the students prepared themselves for the challenge ahead. However, before they could start, Principal Nizu appeared, accompanied by a man in a Shiketsu uniform. Aizawa, Kan, All Might, and Midnight all looked at Nizu with raised eyebrows, mirroring the confusion of the students. Nizu greeted them with a smile. "Hello, students," he began. "May I introduce Mr. Takahiro Yumekwi, the newly appointed principal of Shiketsu High." Aizawa's brow furrowed slightly. A new principal this late in the year. What happened to the old one? He wondered silently. The students examined the Shiketsu principal curiously. He was as tall as All Might in his muscular form, with pure black eyes that resembled voids. His hair was a dark pink, adding to his striking appearance. Despite these unusual features, he wore a standard Shiketsu uniform, giving him an air of formality. "Hello, students." Principal Yumekwi greeted them in a cheery tone. "As your principal informed you, I am Shiketsu's newly appointed principal, and I have come here with an important announcement." "Ha!" Ken interjected, puzzled. "What kind of announcement?" Principal Yumekwi's smile widened. "I am here to announce that from this moment forward, UA and Shiketsu will be going to war," he declared enthusiastically. The statement hung in the air, leaving everyone confused. Whispers spread through the students as they tried to make sense of his words. "Oi! What the hell are you talking about? You want to go to war with us?" Bakugu shouted, his voice echoing through the training ground. Takahiro turned his attention to Bakugu with a wide grin. "Ah, you must be Katsuki Bakugu. Our dear Conqueror has taken a special interest in you. After all, you are one of the 5 war potentials." Bakugu's confusion deepened. He had no idea who this Conqueror was or why being labeled a war potential sounded so ominous, but he didn't like it, not one bit. Aizawa stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he faced Nizu and Takahiro. "What do you mean by declaring war on us?" he demanded. Takahiro met Aizawa's gaze with a cheerful expression. "Ah, Eraserhead. I was wondering when we would meet. What I mean is that thanks to some convincing from a few friends in the HPSC, UA and Shiketsu will be engaging in a little friendly war to determine which school produces the best heroes." Aizawa's suspicion only grew. He could tell there was more to the story. The Shiketsu principal was clearly withholding something. Takahiro noticed Aizawa's skepticism and smirked. "You're sharper than I thought, Eraserhead," he predicted you'd see through that half-truth. Ken stepped forward, his curiosity piqued. "So what's the real story?" he asked. Takahiro looked at Nizu with a knowing expression. "I believe it's your right to tell them what is happening, Nizu," he said, his tone indicating a mix of seriousness and anticipation. Nizu nodded, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced with solemnity as he addressed the assembled teachers and students. To the public and the media, this upcoming competition is merely a friendly rivalry between the two most prestigious hero schools in Japan. However, in reality, this war will determine the fate of both UA and Shiketsu. The gravity of Nizu's words hung heavy in the air, prompting worried murmurs and concerned glances among the students. "Sir, what do you mean by determine the fate?" Itsuka asked, voicing the collective confusion and anxiety. Nizu sighed deeply, his furry brows furrowing. Due to recent events and increasing concerns about safety, the Hero Public Safety Commission has debated the future of UA. Some members argue that UA poses too much risk and should be shut down. No way. They can't just shut us down. Kirishima interjected, his voice tinged with disbelief. How is this possible? After everything we've been through. Momo added, her expression a mix of frustration and defiance. DMN, those freaking suits. Bakugo growled, his hands clenching into fists. Nizu raised a paw to calm the growing uproar. Fortunately, he continued, the other half of the HPSC comprises friends and several UA graduates who have vehemently opposed the closure. This internal battle over UA's fate has been ongoing since the Kamino ward incident. He paused, his eyes scanning the faces of the students. Now, the HPSC has reached a tentative agreement, albeit with conditions, which is? All Might asked, his voice tinged with concern and disbelief. UA and Shiketsu will battle each other until there is only one school left standing, Takahiro explained calmly, his words carrying a weight that sent a chill down the spines of all present. The winning school will be crowned the #1 hero school in all of Japan, with a substantial budget increase. Meanwhile, the losing school will face a 50% budget cut for the remainder of this year and the next. The shock and gravity of Takahiro's declaration hung heavy in the air, causing murmurs of concern and anxiety among the teachers and students alike. All Might's usually stoic expression faltered for a moment, his eyes widening with realization. That's unprecedented, he managed to say, clearly shaken by the implications for both schools. Takahiro nodded, his smile widening ever so slightly. Indeed, it's a shame it has come to this. But as I said, we have come to declare war, and this war. His words were cut short by sudden explosions and fires erupting from various training facilities and the main gym of UA. The students gasped in horror and turned to witness the destruction unfolding behind them, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief as parts of their beloved school were obliterated in a matter of moments. Starts now, Takahiro concluded with a sinister grin, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction at the chaos he had unleashed. Bakugo, his expression a mask of fury, immediately turned towards Takahiro with explosive intent. BSTRD, he roared, launching himself forward with blazing determination. But before Bakugo could reach Takahiro, the Shiketsu principle began to fade away, his form dissipating like a mirage in the wind. Takahiro chuckled softly as he vanished from sight, his voice echoing hauntingly. He was right about Yukachin, his words lingered in the air, leaving an unsettling feeling in their wake. Hearing his old nickname sent a jolt through Bakugo's senses. The name, Kachin, was one he thought he'd left behind, a remnant of a time long past. Only a select few knew it, and only one person had ever called him that consistently. It can't be. Bakugo's mind raced, trying to process the implications. The thought churned in his mind, mingling with the chaos unfolding around him. Turning back to face the destruction that had erupted within UA's training facilities, Bakugo took in the stunned expressions of his classmates and teachers. Each face bore a mix of shock, anger, and determination. They were all processing the weight of what Takahiro's declaration meant, not just a battle for supremacy between schools, but a fight for the very existence of UA itself. The school held a profound significance for Bakugo, one that went beyond mere education. UA had been his refuge, a place where he had honed his skills and forged friendships. It was here that he had grown as a hero, guided by mentors who had seen potential in him. As memories of his time at UA flashed through his mind, the rigorous training, the fierce competitions, the camaraderie forged in the face of danger, Bakugo's resolve hardened. He couldn't allow all of that to be erased, not by some arbitrary declaration of war. "This school it saved me," Bakugo muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with a rare vulnerability. "I'm not about to let it all end like this." With a determined glare, Bakugo turned back towards the fading image of Takahiro. The challenge ahead loomed large, but he was ready to face it head-on. Whatever it took, he would fight to defend UA, uphold its legacy, and prove that its students were worthy of being called heroes. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. When Takahiro returned to Shiketsu, the eager first-year hero course students awaited him. Standing prominently among them was the student poised to lead them to victory, the one revered at Shiketsu as the Conqueror, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku greeted his principal with a calm smile as he stood before his classmates. "So, did you manage to pull it off?" he inquired. Takahiro nodded confidently. "Indeed, I have," he affirmed. "Now, if the rest of our plan unfolds as anticipated, we'll secure victory in this war and establish Shiketsu as the unquestioned premier hero school." Izuku's expression remained neutral. "Right," he began cautiously. "Our strategy hinges on timing, we wait for the opportune moment to strike, and we're prepared to counter any retaliation." Takahiro chuckled approvingly. "You've proven yourself an astute strategist, Midoriya. I'm pleased to have placed you in charge of our operations." His tone turned sly. "Oh, and I must inform you, one of the war potentials attempted an attack on me." Izuku's brow furrowed in concern. "Who?" he asked sharply. "Your friend, Bakugo," Takahiro announced with a smirk. A flicker of irritation crossed Izuku's features. "He's not my friend," he asserted firmly. Takahiro smirked knowingly. "Of course," he acknowledged, then shifted gears. "So, have you assembled our elite force?" he queried with intrigue. Izuku nodded confidently, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I have," he affirmed, gesturing behind him. "May I introduce our very own Sternritter?" Takahiro turned to see a group of Shiketsu students clad in their distinctive uniforms, their faces obscured by shadows. Despite the concealment, Takahiro recognized each one, a knowing grin spreading across his face. "Impressive, Conqueror," he complimented Izuku. "I made a deal with you," Izuku stated coldly, his voice laced with determination. "I'll help you as long as you let me return home and grant me my revenge. I want to see Bakugo pay for his actions and I want UA to fall." Takahiro nodded in agreement, his expression serious. "We share the same goal. UA has taken from both of us, it's only fitting that we take something back," he declared. "I'm placing you in charge of this war. If you can conquer UA, I have no doubt you'll have the prowess to conquer anything." With those words, Takahiro turned and walked away, leaving Izuku and his assembled Sternritter to their preparations. As Izuku watched him depart, he turned back to his comrades, all 25 of them, and issued commands for the upcoming conflict. Every detail mattered, timing and strategy were crucial. After they departed, Izuku ascended to the roof of Shiketsu High. From this vantage point, he gazed out over the sprawling city, his eyes fixed on the distant location of UA. It struck him as ironic how, once upon a time, UA had been his aspiration, the embodiment of his dreams. Yet now, he stood poised to dismantle it, to engage in war against the very institution he once revered. Life had a way of reshaping one's ambitions. The hardships he had endured, the trials that had tested him, they had molded him into someone who saw the world through different eyes. But perhaps, he mused silently, this transformation was necessary. If he had remained the hopeful, naive boy who once idolized heroes without question, he wouldn't possess the resolve needed for this fight. The events that scarred him, the betrayals he faced, they had tempered him into steel. Now, standing atop Shiketsu High, he wasn't just Izuku Midoriya or Deku anymore. He was the Conqueror, a title earned through sheer determination and the relentless pursuit of his goals. Shiketsu had seen his prowess, his strategic mind, and now UA would witness his wrath. He had proven himself at Shiketsu with nothing more than his intellect and determination. Now, he would show UA what true power looked like. Nothing would deter him from his path. Not sentiment, not hesitation, nothing. As the wind ruffled his hair and the city stretched out before him, Izuku's gaze hardened with resolve. The Conqueror had arrived, and he was ready to reshape the hero landscape, starting with the downfall of UA. Chapter 2, Action-Reaction. The tension in the room was palpable as classes 1A and 1B gathered in the common area, their faces reflecting a mix of frustration and determination. The earlier attack by Shiketsu had left UA's reputation and their pride in shambles. Conversations buzzed as students voiced their opinions on what to do next. "So, what's the plan?" Bakugo demanded, his arms crossed and eyes blazing with frustration. His voice cut through the chatter like a knife, forcing everyone's attention on him. The group fell silent for a moment before Ida stepped forward, his ever-practical demeanor intact. Adjusting his glasses, he addressed Bakugo with a calm but firm tone. "We should wait and see what the teachers have planned," he said, his words measured. "This isn't a situation to approach carelessly. UA will have a coordinated response." Bakugo's expression twisted into a snarl. He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the room. "Screw that," he shouted, his voice raw with anger. "That Shiketsu BSTRD waltzed in here and tore apart UA. The teachers will spend days coming up with some overcomplicated plan while those assholes are already plotting their next move. We can't just sit around and wait, we need to hit them back. Take them by surprise before they even see it coming." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Bakugo's fiery attitude wasn't new, but the truth in his words struck a chord. Still, Ida wasn't one to back down. He raised his hand, his tone stern as he replied. "Rash action won't get us anywhere. Charging in without a strategy will only make things worse. This is about more than our pride, it's about keeping everyone safe." Unfortunately, came a calm yet resolute voice, "I'd have to agree with Bakugo." All eyes turned to Momo, who stood with a thoughtful expression. She didn't flinch under the sudden attention, her usual poise shining through. Jairu's brow shot up in surprise as she turned to her best friend. "Yamomo," she asked, using the nickname she reserved for their private moments. "You're siding with him?" Momo Yaoyorozu stood at the center of the room, her calm voice commanding attention despite the gravity of her words. The Shiketsu principal, Takahiro Yumekwi, knew about this before informing Principal Nizu or any of us. That gave them ample time to infiltrate UA and sabotage our training facilities, all without any member of the staff catching wind of it. If we give them more time, they could strike again, not only causing further damage but potentially injuring or incapacitating some of us. Our best course of action is to turn the tables and take them by surprise before they have the chance to act. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs as the students digested her argument. Itsuka Kendo, the de facto leader of Class 1B, nodded in agreement and stepped forward. "I agree," she said firmly. "We need to take the fight to them. If they manage to infiltrate UA so easily, it's possible they've done so before. For all we know, they might already know the layout of the school, and if that's the case, they'll exploit it." Monoma leaned casually against the wall, his expression sly but his tone serious. "True, but we can't all just storm into Shiketsu, guns blazing. If both heroic classes leave UA, we're leaving our defenses in the hands of the second years. Most of the third years are already juggling hero work alongside their studies, and Shiketsu will likely have all their students ready and waiting for us. It's a numbers game, and they'd win." Momo nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging his point. "Exactly. A full-scale assault would leave UA vulnerable, and we can't afford that. Instead, a small, highly capable group should lead the attack. Meanwhile, the rest of us will fortify UA's defenses and prepare for any counterattacks they might launch." Tetsu crossed his arms, his brow furrowed. "Good plan, but who do we send? We can't just throw a random group at them." "Well, one of them has to be Bakugo, of course," Kirishima chimed in, a grin spreading across his face as if the answer was obvious. The room fell silent, and every pair of eyes turned toward him with confusion. Why Bakugu? Setsuna Tokage asked, tilting her head, her lizard-like tail flicking in curiosity. Kirishima grinned, leaning back with a casual shrug. Well, you heard Shiketsu's principle, right? Bakugu's apparently a war potential. That means they probably see him as one of the biggest threats UA has to offer. Todoroki, ever calm and composed, nodded in agreement. He did mention that. Bakugu was one of 5 individuals he specifically called out. If that's true, though, who are the other 4? The group fell silent, the weight of the statement sinking in. 2 of them are probably you two, Tsuyu said bluntly, her wide eyes fixed on Kirishima and Todoroki. Us? Kirishima asked, pointing at himself in confusion. Tsuyu nodded, her tone as straightforward as ever. Both of you are dual quirk users. Todoroki's got his fire and ice, and you've got your hardening and super strength. Kirishima stiffened slightly, his usual carefree demeanor faltering. Oh, yeah, I guess you're right, he said, scratching the back of his neck nervously. Bakugu glanced at his friend, immediately recognizing the discomfort in his expression. He didn't need to ask why, he knew the weight Kirishima carried about his so-called second quirk. Before anyone could press further, Mineta broke the tension with his usual brand of panic. But that still leaves 2 other people. Who are they? Maybe 2 students from our class. Shirhai Kurwaro suggested, his voice low as he stepped out of the shadows he'd been leaning against. Itsuka shook her head thoughtfully. Maybe, but it's highly unlikely. Monoma raised a curious brow, his tone laced with mild skepticism. And why's that, MDM president? Care to enlighten us? Itsuka crossed her arms and leveled him with a matter-of-fact gaze. Because, unlike 1A, we don't have anyone with major destructive capabilities. Sure, we're strong as a class, but let's be honest, those 3 in Class A are on a whole other level when it comes to raw power. Monoma opened his mouth to argue but quickly snapped it shut. For once, even he couldn't refute her point. They do have Bakugu, Todoroki, and Kirishima, Setsuna Tokage chimed in, her voice light but thoughtful. Between Bakugu's explosions, Todoroki's half-and-half quirk, and Kirishima's insane strength, it's hard to argue they're not the strongest first years. But that doesn't mean they're invincible. The other 2 war potentials could easily be upperclassmen or even students from other departments, she added with a grin. An excellent observation, Ida said, nodding in agreement. He adjusted his glasses as he addressed the group. It's entirely possible the remaining individuals Shiketsu fears come from different parts of UA. For instance, there's a student in general studies who has shown considerable promise, as well as Mei Hatsum from the support department. Both could be candidates. Dreadlocks does make some pretty cool stuff, Bakugu said with a rare note of respect in his voice, thinking back to the upgraded gauntlets Hatsum had crafted for him. Hell, some of it's better than what the pros use. And then there's Shinso, Ojiro added, his tail flicking as he spoke. His ability to mind control anyone who responds to him. That's not just useful, it's dangerous. If I were Shiketsu, I'd definitely see him as a threat. True, Momo agreed, her tone contemplative. She began pacing slightly, her hand resting on her chin. There are strong contenders in other departments and years. That being said, we can speculate endlessly, but it won't get us anywhere right now. She paused and looked up at the group, her voice resolute. Let's put a pin in figuring out the other war potentials and focus on something actionable like who else we're sending with Bakugu. Obviously, I'm going with him, Kirishima declared, standing up with a determined grin. No, you're not, Bakugu said sharply, cutting him off. If you're a war potential, then you're staying here. If Shiketsu's planning something, they might hit us while we're out. We can't afford to leave UA without someone like you to back them up. Kirishima blinked in surprise, taken aback by Bakugu's logic. But, he's right, Ida interjected, his voice calm but firm. We need our strongest assets here to defend UA in case of retaliation. That means both you and Todoroki should stay. It's a matter of strategy, not capability. Todoroki nodded silently in agreement, his expression unreadable. Kirishima's shoulders slumped slightly, but he nodded reluctantly. Fine. But if anything goes wrong, I'm coming after you guys, no questions asked. Bakugo smirked, crossing his arms. Yeah. Like I need you worrying about me. So, who else is going with you? Kirishima asked, shifting the focus back to the mission. I'll go, Tokoyami said, stepping forward. His voice was steady, and Dark Shadow emerged briefly, giving a nod of agreement. Dark Shadow and I excel in covert operations. We can scout ahead and handle any ambushes. Count me in too. Kaminari grinned, giving a thumbs up. Every team needs a guy who can light up the competition. Plus, I've got Bakugo's back. I'm in, Zero added, casually rolling his shoulders. My tape's perfect for securing the area and keeping enemies from running off. Besides, someone has to keep these two in line, he said with a teasing glance at Kaminari. Me for. Mina chimed in enthusiastically, punching the air. I'm not letting you guys have all the fun. Besides, my acid's great for breaking through defenses and, let's be honest, I bring the morale. And I shall go as well, Momo said, her voice resolute as she stepped forward. Bakugo turned to her, raising a skeptical brow. Ha! Why you? Momo met his gaze with unwavering determination. Because this is more than just a retaliation mission. I want to see if I can catch a glimpse of this so-called Conqueror, their principal mentioned. If they're truly the key to Shiketsu's strength, we need to gather as much intel as possible and I can analyze and report back. When those words left Momo's lips, Bakugo's mind was yanked back to the unsettling encounter with Principal Yumekwi earlier that day. Ah, you must be Katsuki Bakugo, Yumekwi had said, his sly smile sending a chill down Bakugo's spine. Our dear Conqueror has taken a special interest in you. After all, you are one of the 5 war potentials. Yumekwi's words echoed in his head, and they collided with another voice, one much more familiar, much closer to home. He was right about Yukakin. The nickname hit Bakugo like a freight train, and for a moment, he could feel his chest tighten. His mind conjured up a face he never thought he'd see again, one he hadn't seen in years. It couldn't be, could it? That name, that voice, no one else called him that. No one else except No. It can't be him, there's no way, Bakugo thought, clenching his fists tightly as his heart raced. He gave up that dream a long time ago. The tension in the room barely registered to him until Jiro's voice snapped him back to the present. Why do you want to see this Conqueror guy so badly, Momo? Jiro asked, raising an eyebrow as she leaned against the table. Momo straightened her posture, her tone measured and composed. I did some research after the attack, during the staff meeting, she explained. According to the data I found, the Conqueror is a first-year student who was recommended to Shiketsu. From what I've gathered, he's being hailed as the best and brightest student their school has ever seen. A murmur spread through the room, the weight of Momo's words sinking in. That doesn't explain the nickname, Itsuka pointed out, crossing her arms. Why do they call him the Conqueror? It's not exactly a flattering title for a hero in training. Momo let out a long, exasperated sigh. From what I read, it's because he's literally defeated every student at Shiketsu. What, came the collective, shocked cries of both Class 1A and 1B. How is that even possible? Todoroki asked, his voice flat but with an edge of disbelief. Momo nodded slowly, her gaze flicking to the others as she explained. Shiketsu is the complete opposite of UA. While we focus on teamwork and the core values of what it means to be a hero, compassion, sacrifice, and cooperation, Shiketsu encourages a more competitive environment. They push their students to strive to be the best, even if that means going up against their own classmates. It's a sink or swim mentality, one that values individual success above all else. She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. As the story goes, this conqueror showed up, challenged everyone in his class, and won. Over and over again. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with disbelief and concern. How? Ida asked, his voice filled with genuine shock. Was it his quirk? It has to be, right? No one could defeat everyone without a serious advantage. Momo nodded again, her eyes narrowing slightly. It was his quirk, but the details are vague. No one knows exactly what it is, just that it's powerful enough to overpower the entire student body. But the specifics remain a mystery. A murmur rippled through the room as everyone processed the implications of what Momo had just said. Bakugu's mind immediately began running over the possibilities. If it was a powerful quirk, then that rules out Midoriya, he thought, feeling a brief flicker of relief. But as quickly as that thought appeared, a nagging doubt crept in, pushing at the edges of his mind. A part of him still wanted to scream that it had to be Midoriya, even though every logical bone in his body screamed the opposite. He clenched his fists, trying to shake the feeling. Trying to quiet the doubt, Bakugu forced his voice to cut through the tension. Is there a name for this BSTRD? He asked, his tone sharp and challenging. Momo turned to Bakugu, meeting his intense gaze, and shook her head. I'm afraid not, she replied firmly, her tone tinged with a hint of regret. Bakugu's jaw tightened at her words. That wasn't the answer he'd wanted, though he wasn't entirely sure what he had been hoping for. A part of him wanted the name, just to confirm once and for all that this Conqueror wasn't who his gut kept telling him it might be. But it didn't matter. It couldn't be Deku. There was no way. This Conqueror guy's got strength, skill, and a quirk powerful enough to take down an entire school of students, Bakugu thought, clenching his fists at his sides. None of which that stupid, green-haired nerd ever had. Deku doesn't belong in this league. Still, despite his attempts to convince himself, an uncomfortable knot formed in his stomach. It was that tiny, infuriating part of him that refused to let it go. The part that remembered how Deku used to look at him with unwavering determination, even when Bakugu hadn't unlocked his quirk. The part that remembered how, time and time again, Deku had defied the odds and risen up in ways Bakugu never expected. TCH, Bakugu scoffed under his breath, shoving the thought aside. It's not him. It can't be him. Are you okay, Bakugu? Kirishima's voice broke through his thoughts, concern evident in his tone. Mind your DMN business, shitty hair, Bakugu snapped, his voice sharper than intended. He turned away, not wanting anyone to see the turmoil flickering in his eyes. We've wasted enough time talking about this Conqueror. Let's focus on the plan. We've got a fight to bring to Shiketsu, and I'm not waiting around for them to come at us first. Kirishima exchanged a glance with Momo and Ida, who both seemed equally concerned but decided against pressing the issue. Momo, ever composed, shifted the focus back to the group. Bakugu's right. We can speculate all day about who the Conqueror is, but that won't help us right now. Our priority is organizing the strike team and ensuring UA is prepared for any counterattacks. The students began to discuss strategies again, but Bakugu's thoughts lingered elsewhere. But no matter how many times he repeated it, that stubborn, nagging voice in the back of his mind kept whispering, what if you're wrong? XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The following day, Bakugu's crew had assembled just outside UA's imposing gates. The group was a mix of determination and energy, each member suited up in their hero gear and brimming with anticipation. Their plan was bold, maybe reckless, but they were ready to confront Shiketsu on their own terms. Bakugu surveyed his team, arms crossed and eyes sharp. You extras ready to do this, he barked, his tone as fiery as ever. Hell yeah. Kaminari hollered, electricity crackling faintly around his fingertips as his excitement surged. Time to show those Shiketsu punks what we're made of. Mina chimed in, her usual cheerful smile now laced with a competitive edge. Zero, ever laid back, gave a casual thumbs up and flashed his trademark grin. Let's do it. Bakugu's eyes shifted to the quieter members of the group. He jabbed a finger toward Momo and Tokoyami. Ponytail. Bird brain. You ready, or what? Tokoyami inclined his head solemnly, his deep voice humming. The shadows are restless. I am prepared. Momo straightened her posture, her tone calm yet resolute. I'm ready, Bakugu. And I've arranged for something that'll get us there quickly. Bakugu's brow furrowed as he tilted his head in confusion. What are you talking about? Before Momo could respond, the low hum of an engine cut through the air. A sleek black limousine rolled up to the curb, its polished exterior gleaming in the sunlight. The driver stepped out and respectfully opened the back door, bowing slightly. Momo gestured toward the vehicle, a faint smile playing on her lips. This is what I meant. We'll arrive in style and with efficiency. For a moment, Bakugu just stared, his surprise evident. Then, a sly grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. Ha! Not bad, Ponytail. Without hesitation, he climbed into the limo, followed by the rest of the group, who exchanged amused glances as they filed inside. The spacious interior was lined with leather seats and glowing with soft ambient lighting. Kaminari's eyes widened in awe. This is insane. Kaminari exclaimed, practically bouncing in his seat. Definitely a step up from the school bus, Shiro joked, reclining comfortably. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror, his expression calm and professional. Where to, young Mississippi? Momo nodded confidently. Take us to Shiketsu High. As the limo pulled away from UA, the team's chatter quieted, their expressions growing serious. This wasn't just a joyride, they were heading straight into the lion's den, ready to make their mark. As the limo cruised through the city streets, the group settled into the comfortable leather seats, but the tension inside was palpable. Momo, ever the strategist, decided it was time to lay out a plan before they reached Shiketsu. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she spoke, her voice calm yet commanding. All right, listen up, she began, drawing the team's attention. First, I suggest we scout Shiketsu's grounds. We need to locate potential entry points, identify their defenses, and find where they're at their weakest. With Mina's agility and Tokoyami's ability to blend into the shadows, infiltration should be straightforward. Bakugu, seated across from her with his arms crossed, leaned forward slightly. And once we're in. What then, genius? He asked, his tone challenging but curious. Momo met his fiery gaze without flinching. Once inside, we split into two teams, she explained, her tone steady. Tokoyami, Shiro, and I will focus on identifying any structural or strategic weaknesses. If UA needs to mount a major counterattack later, we'll have the intel they need. Additionally, we'll search for information on the Conqueror, his location, his plans, anything we can find. Kaminari, seated next to Bakugu, raised a hand as if he were in class. And us? What's our role? Momo turned to him with a small, confident smile. Your team will be the distraction. You, Bakugu, and Mina will create as much chaos as possible. Kaminari, your priority will be to short-circuit their system security cameras, alarms, anything electronic. Mina, use your acid to dissolve barriers, blockades, or anything else that could hinder us. And Bakugu, she paused, her smile taking on a mischievous edge. I want you to do what you do best, blow everything to kingdom come. Bakugu's lips curled into a wicked grin, his crimson eyes gleaming with excitement. Now that's more like it, he said, clenching a fist. With the plan set, the group fell silent, each member mentally preparing for the task ahead. The city lights outside blurred as the limos sped closer to their destination. After what felt like an eternity but was only about 30 minutes, the sleek vehicle came to a halt. The driver turned slightly in his seat, addressing Momo. We've arrived, young Mississippi. The group peered out the tinted windows, their eyes locking onto the imposing structure of Shiketsu High just across the street. The school loomed like a fortress, its gates tall and its walls reinforced. Momo turned to her teammates, her expression resolute. This is it. Stick to the plan, and we'll show Shiketsu what we're capable of. Bakugo pushed open the door with a smirk. Let's get this over with, he growled, stepping out onto the pavement. As the group stood across the street, they took in the imposing sight of Shiketsu High. The school was nothing like UA's modern, sleek campus. Shiketsu resembled a fortress ripped straight out of a Gothic novel, a massive, black structure with towering spires and arched windows framed in iron. Gargoyle-like carvings jutted out from the corners, their menacing faces glaring down at anyone who dared approach. Smaller towers flanked the main building, their sharp peaks cutting into the cloudy sky. It was dark, foreboding, and undeniably intimidating. Talk about creepy, Zero muttered, his eyes scanning the architecture. More like something out of a vampire movie, Mina added with a shiver, though her playful grin remained intact. I half expect Dracula to step out and welcome us inside. Momo nodded thoughtfully, her eyes narrowing as she studied the structure. It's certainly designed to intimidate. But we can use that to our advantage, she said, her voice calm and composed. Turning to Bakugo, she added, I'll take Zero and Tokoyami around the back. If there's a weak point in their defenses, we'll find it. You three can handle the front, right? Bakugo scoffed, rolling his shoulders as his crimson eyes glinted with excitement. TCH, no problem, Ponytail. By the time I'm done with these Shiketsu BSTRDS, this war will be over before it even starts. Momo gave him a curt nod. Good. Stick to the plan. With that, the team split into two groups. Momo, Tokoyami, and Zero disappeared into the shadows, moving silently along the side of the street to circle around. Meanwhile, Bakugo, Kaminari, and Mina strode confidently across the road, their focus locked on the towering front gates of Shiketsu High. As they reached the gate, Bakugo came to a halt, his grin widening into something feral and unrestrained. His hands began to glow as sparks crackled around his palms, his quirk charging up with raw explosive power. Hey, ya BSTRDS, he bellowed, his voice echoing across the Gothic courtyard. Knock, knock. Guess who? Without waiting for an answer, Bakugo unleashed a massive explosion, the force of it shaking the ground as the front gates shattered into pieces. Black smoke billowed into the air, and the once intimidating entryway now lay in ruins. Subtle as always, Kaminari muttered with a nervous laugh, sparks dancing along his fingertips in preparation. I mean, at least it's effective, Mina quipped, her acid already bubbling in her hands as she prepared for the fight ahead. As the smoke began to clear, the three spotted a group of Shiketsu students rushing toward them. Here they come. Mina shouted, her voice ringing with determination. She activated her quirk, carefully controlling the acidity of her attack. Instead of going for something destructive, she opted for a milder approach, enough to give the charging students an uncomfortable itch and slow them down without causing real harm. Before she could launch her attack, however, Bakugo surged forward, explosions crackling in his palms as he blasted through the air. Out of my way, he roared, releasing a massive blast that sent dust and debris flying. The explosion tore through the space ahead, leaving a cloud of smoke in its wake. But as the smoke began to clear, the scene before them wasn't what they expected. There were no students sprawled out or reeling from the impact. Instead, the supposed Shiketsu students they'd seen charging at them shimmered faintly and began to dissolve into glittering particles of light, disappearing entirely. What the hell? Bakugo shouted, coming to a sudden stop. He whipped his head around, his sharp eyes scanning the area for answers. Where'd they go? Kaminari and Mina quickly ran to his side, their expressions just as puzzled. Did we just imagine them? Kaminari asked, electricity sparking at his fingertips as he looked around warily. That's way too weird, Mina said, lowering her hands. They were just there, right? Charging. Straight at us. Before they could process further, the sound of slow, deliberate clapping echoed through the courtyard. The trio turned toward the source of the sound, their guard immediately up. Out of the shadows of the ruined gate walked a teen dressed in the signature Shiketsu uniform, complete with the school's distinct cap. As he stepped closer, the group took in his appearance: short, jet-black hair with asymmetrical bangs framing his face, and a pair of round red sunglasses perched on his nose, glinting ominously under the dim light. "Bravo! Bravo! Bravo!" the teen said, his voice laced with mock amusement as he continued clapping. "What an entrance! Truly worthy of someone like you, Special War Potential Katsuki Bakugu." Bakugu's eyes narrowed, his hands sparking dangerously. "TCH, who the hell are you supposed to be?" The teen stopped in his tracks, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He adjusted his sunglasses with a flourish before offering a slight bow. When he straightened, his tone was even more theatrical. "I am Sternritter J, the jail, Quiljopi," he declared, his voice dripping with self-assured pride. "One of the Conqueror's most loyal knights, here to personally greet you and express my gratitude to dear Kami for her wonderfully convincing illusions." "Kami?" Mina whispered, glancing at Kaminari, who looked equally bewildered. Quilj's smirk widened as he straightened his posture, the faintest aura of menace radiating from him. "You didn't really think Shiketsu's elite students, we Sternritter, would blindly charge at you, did you?" "Oh no, no, no," he said, wagging a finger at them like a scolding parent. "Sternritter." Kaminari repeated, his voice filled with curiosity and a tinge of apprehension. Quilj turned his gaze to Kaminari, his red sunglasses glinting ominously. He scanned the pair standing next to Bakugu and gave a small, amused smirk. "Ah, Denki Kaminari and Mina Ashido, better known as Charbolt and Pinky. What a pleasure it is to meet you both in person." Kaminari blinked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "You know us?" he asked, his tone laced with both worry and curiosity. "Of course," Quilj replied with a nod, his voice as smooth as silk. "His Majesty has gathered extensive data on every hero course student at UA, from the first years to the third. Your quirks, your accomplishments, your weaknesses, nothing escapes his sight." Mina crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Creepy. What kind of guy just collects data on students like that?" Quilj chuckled, as if amused by her question. "Only a leader who understands the importance of knowing his opponents before they even realize they're part of the game," he said, his tone almost mocking. Bakugu stepped forward, his glare never wavering as sparks began crackling in his palms again. "Enough of this CRP. If your so-called boss is so great, where the hell is he?" he demanded, his voice brimming with impatience. "What? Is he too scared to come out and face me himself?" At Bakugu's words, Quilj's body stiffened, his smirk fading into a sharp frown. The atmosphere seemed to grow heavier as his eyes bore into Bakugu. "Scared? You think His Majesty the Conqueror is scared of you, Katsuki Bakugu?" His voice was low and calm but carried an unmistakable edge. "No, no, no, His Majesty hasn't feared you in a long time." Quilj's lips curved into a chilling smile as he tilted his head slightly. "In fact, he's quite familiar with you. Isn't that right, Kachin?" The nickname fell from Quilj's lips like a bomb, and its impact was immediate. Bakugu froze in place, his eyes widening in shock. His sparking hands fell to his sides as his mind raced. That name, it had been years since anyone had called him that, and hearing it now from a stranger sent an icy chill down his spine. "How the hell do you know that name?" Bakugu growled, though his voice betrayed the unease brewing beneath his anger. Quilj's grin widened at Bakugu's reaction. "Ah, so you do remember," he said with a tone that was both teasing and triumphant. "He believed you'd forgotten all about him, that you'd moved on entirely. But it seems that name still holds weight for you, doesn't it, Kachin?" Bakugu clenched his fists, his shock slowly giving way to rage. "Who told you that?" he demanded, his voice trembling with both anger and confusion. As this tense exchange unfolded, Mina and Kaminari exchanged baffled glances. Mina turned to Bakugu, her brows furrowed and her voice laced with confusion. Bakugu. What's he talking about? Why is he calling you Kachin? Her question hung in the air for only a moment before Quilge's grin widened, his sharp teeth glinting behind his amused expression. Ah, so you haven't told them, he said mockingly, turning his attention back to Bakugu. How rude. You and His Majesty used to be such close friends. Inseparable, even. But I suppose it's easy to forget someone you deemed, how shall I put it, useless. Mina's confusion deepened as she glanced at Kaminari, who was just as bewildered. What the hell is he talking about, Bakugu? Kaminari demanded, his voice rising in alarm. Do you know who this Conqueror guy is? Bakugu's growl rumbled low in his throat, his crimson eyes locked on Quilge with an intensity that could burn through steel. His hands sparked faintly, but for once, he didn't immediately lash out. Instead, his silence was telling. Quilge, watching him carefully, tilted his head with a sudden flash of realization. His grin turned almost pitying, his voice softening into something dangerously close to mock sympathy. Oh, I see now, he said, dragging the words out. You had a suspicion, didn't you? A nagging thought in the back of your mind. But no, he leaned forward slightly, his sunglasses catching the light. You couldn't bring yourself to believe it. Could you, Kachin? Bakugu's fists clenched tighter as Quilge continued, each word driving the metaphorical knife deeper. Our conqueror, Quilge said, his voice dripping with theatrical glee, is none other than Izuku Midoriya. The name hit like a thunderclap. Izuku. Mina muttered under her breath, tilting her head slightly. The name wasn't unfamiliar, but it wasn't one she immediately connected. Wait, who's that? Bakugu took a step forward, his growl turning into a snarl as his anger boiled over. Ignoring Mina's question, he shouted, it can't be true. There's no way that useless nerd is your leader. Quilge let out a slow, deliberate chuckle, his confidence unshaken in the face of Bakugu's rage. Unfortunately for you, Kachin, he said smoothly, it is the truth. Izuku Midoriya, your once useless nerd, is our conqueror. Your past mistakes, your arrogance, all of it fueled the fire that made him who he is today. Bakugu's jaw tightened, and for a split second, his usual bravado wavered. His mind raced as memories of his childhood with Midoriya flooded back, the boy who had once idolized him, the one he relentlessly bullied, and the one who had somehow always stood back up despite the odds. And to answer your first question, Quilge added, his smirk returning. Izuku is not here, huh? Bakugu shouted, his voice echoing off the towering Gothic walls of Shiketsu. His crimson eyes burned with fury as he stepped forward, sparks popping in his palms. What the hell do you mean? Where is he? Quilge let out a soft, amused chuckle, the sound somehow more infuriating than anything else. Why, he's at UA, the stern Ritter replied, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with Bakugu's rage. By now, I imagine he's turning it into a pile of rubble. Perhaps even ashes, depending on his mood. Liar. Kaminari shouted, stepping forward, his fists clenched and small arcs of electricity flickering around his hands. His usual lightheartedness was replaced with uncharacteristic anger. Quilge turned his attention to Kaminari, tilting his head slightly, his smirk never wavering. Oh. You don't believe me, he asked, his voice dripping with mock surprise. Tell me, Charbolt, do you hear or see any other students here besides myself? Kaminari opened his mouth to fire back, but something in Quilge's tone made him hesitate. He glanced around the courtyard, his gaze sweeping over the eerie, Gothic surroundings. To his growing unease, he realized Quilge was right, there were no other students in sight. The supposed army of Shiketsu defenders had vanished like smoke, leaving only Quilge standing before them. See? Quilge said, spreading his arms theatrically as if presenting his point. Our dear Izukudano knew that if anyone were going to strike after Takahiro's little stunt, it would be you, Katsuki Bakugu. Your brashness, your impulsiveness, it's so very predictable. Bakugu growled, but Quilge pressed on, unbothered. In fact, We anticipated that Eijiro Kirishima and Shoto Todoroki might accompany you. After all, you three are quite the team, aren't you? But no, it seems that the fourth war potential convinced them to stay behind, while she chose to join you here. What the hell are you talking about? Quilch's smirk widened. My point, dear Bakugu, is that there are 2 war potentials here right now. What? Bakugu barked, his voice full of disbelief. What do you mean there are 2? I'm the only one here. Quilch let out a low, sinister chuckle, his red-tinted sunglasses glinting ominously under the faint light. Oh, how delightfully naive of her, he said, his tone dripping with mockery. She truly didn't believe she could have been one of them. How sad, but isn't that just so Momo Yaoyorozu? Always underestimating herself, always assuming she's not significant enough to warrant attention. He smiled wickedly, his sharp teeth visible as he added, yet, she's been on our radar for far longer than she realizes. As those words left Quilch's mouth, an eerie silence settled over the group, broken only by the faint rustling of the wind through Shiketsu's desolate courtyard. A chill swept through Bakugu, Mina, and Kaminari, as though an invisible hand had gripped their spines. Yamomo's the 4th war potential. Mina cried, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. No way. Quilch turned to her, his smirk widening at her reaction. Indeed, he confirmed with a casual nod, his voice carrying a smug satisfaction. Her intellect, her quirk, her resourcefulness, and her brilliant strategic mind, each one rivals that of His Majesty himself. Of course, she would be considered a threat. He spread his arms theatrically as if announcing some grand revelation. Her inclusion was inevitable. Why, it's practically poetic. Kaminari shook his head, still processing what he'd just heard. Yaomomo a war potential. But she doesn't see herself as one, Quilch interrupted smoothly, finishing Kaminari's thought. Of course not. She's far too humble for that. But that humility makes her all the more dangerous. Bakugu, still fuming, finally spoke up, his growl cutting through the air like a blade. So what? Ponytail's smart, sure, but there's no way she's a threat to your so-called conqueror, and if you think she is, then you're even more of an idiot than you look. Quilch's expression didn't falter. In fact, his amusement seemed to grow. Oh, Bakugu, foolishness knows no bounds, but let's not forget, his voice dropped to a more menacing tone, his words dripping with malice. If I destroy you and Yaoyorozu here, there will be no one left to stand against His Majesty. The tides of this little war will shift irreversibly in our favor. Suddenly, a shimmering, translucent blue cage materialized around the front entrance of Shiketsu High. The strange energy crackled with power, its crystalline walls towering high above them and sealing off every possible exit. The air inside grew heavier, charged with an oppressive force. What the hell is this SHT? Bakugu snarled, his crimson eyes darting around as he took in the structure. He slammed an explosive palm against the barrier, only to find his attack fizzle harmlessly against it, leaving the cage untouched. What did you do, you bstrd? He roared, spinning to face Quilch. Quilch let out a long, mocking laugh, his voice ringing out in the enclosed space like a predator toying with its prey. Oh, Bakugu, haven't you been paying attention? He taunted. I told you before, I am Sternritter J, the jailer. He spread his arms wide, gesturing to the glowing cage surrounding them. This is my ultimate ability, the jail. My quirk allows me to create an indestructible cage around myself or my enemies, trapping them completely and rendering escape impossible. Kaminari's eyes widened as he instinctively reached out to touch the barrier. He yelped and pulled his hand back as static energy surged through his fingertips. This thing's no joke, he muttered, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a rare note of seriousness. Quilch grinned at Kaminari's reaction before turning his full attention back to Bakugu. Do you understand now? You're mine. All of you. I'll keep you trapped here for as long as I please, leaving you to stew in your helplessness while His Majesty continues his glorious work. By now, UA is likely nothing more than a crumbling wreck, and your friends," he paused for dramatic effect, a wicked smile creeping across his face. "Well, who knows if they'll even survive the day." The words hit like a thunderclap, and Bakugu's temper erupted like a volcano. "You son of a beach," he bellowed, his voice raw with rage. Without hesitation, he launched himself at Quilge, his palms glowing with volatile energy as he prepared to blast the smug Shiketsu student into oblivion. Quilge stood his ground, the sadistic grin never leaving his face as he watched Bakugu close the gap. "Ah, that famous temper of yours," he mused, raising one hand as if to beckon him closer. "Come, then, Kachin. Show me why His Majesty finds you so fascinating." The air around them exploded as Bakugu unleashed a devastating blast aimed directly at Quilge. The entire cage trembled under the force, sparks flying and smoke filling the confined space. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, through the smoke, Quilge's voice rang out, chillingly calm. "Is that all?" As the smoke cleared, Quilge stood completely unharmed, his body encased in an eerie, shimmering barrier of his own creation. "Did you really think I'd fall to something as basic as that?" he said mockingly. No, Kachin. You're going to have to try a lot harder if you want to break me or my jail." Mina and Kaminari stood frozen in shock, their eyes darting between Bakugu and Quilge. "This is bad," Mina whispered, sweat forming on her brow. "No kidding," Kaminari replied, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to muster his courage. Bakugu, meanwhile, clenched his fists, his palms sparking even brighter. "I don't care what your stupid quirk is," he shouted. "I'm not letting you or that DMN Deku get away with this." Quilge laughed, his confidence unwavering. "Oh, how amusing. But I wonder how long will your bravado last when you realize you truly cannot escape. Let's see how long it takes for despair to set in." The three UA students exchanged determined glances. Trapped, outnumbered, and seemingly outmatched, one thing was clear: they were going to have to fight like hell. Chapter 3, The Purging of UA. As Bakugu's group made their bold departure, the rest of Class 1A gathered in the common room, the tension palpable. Some tried to distract themselves with casual chatter, while others sat quietly, their thoughts consumed by the dangerous mission their classmates had undertaken. The room felt both warm with camaraderie and heavy with unspoken worry. "They're gonna be fine, right?" Kirishima finally asked, breaking the silence. His usual upbeat tone was edged with unease as he glanced around at his friends, seeking reassurance. Ida adjusted his glasses, his movements crisp and purposeful, though there was a slight tremor in his voice. "I believe so," he said confidently. "Yaoyorozu is an exceptional strategist, and they have Tokoyami and Bakugu with them. Both are formidable combatants with unique skill sets. I trust their ability to handle themselves." Kirishima nodded slowly, his brows furrowed. "Yeah, I guess you're right," he admitted. "But still I can't shake this bad feeling, you know. Like something's gonna go wrong." He clenched his fists, the red of his knuckles standing out as he tried to suppress his worry. "I think we're all kinda feelin' that," Achiko said softly, sitting cross-legged on one of the couches. Her eyes were downcast, her expression thoughtful. "I mean, this isn't just some training exercise or mock battle. It's an actual war with another hero school. And with UA on the line, it feels like everything's at stake. It's a lot." "Amen to that," Toru chimed in, her invisible figure slouched on the armrest of the couch. "This whole thing is just so intense. I mean, how did we even get here?" Ojiro leaned back in his chair, his tail flicking idly. "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing," he said with a chuckle, though his voice carried a hint of bitterness. "We thought things would calm down after the League of Villains got locked away, but nope. Here we are, fighting for our school's survival. Are we just cursed or something?" "Sometimes I think we might be," Sato said, letting out a tired sigh. "It's like the universe decided, oh, Class 1A. Let's just throw everything at them." The group broke into soft laughter, a welcome moment of levity in an otherwise tense atmosphere. For a brief moment, the weight on their shoulders seemed a little lighter, and they were just students again, sitting together, sharing jokes, and leaning on each other. As the laughter faded, Jairu, who had been silent until now, spoke up. She had her earphone jacks plugged into the wall, subtly listening to the outside world. "I get why we're worried," she said, her voice low but steady. "But we have to trust them. That's what a team does, right? Trust that they'll do their part, and we'll be ready when it's our turn." Kirishima nodded again, more firmly this time. "Yeah, you're right," he said. "We just have to stay strong and have faith in them. They'll come back, and when they do, we'll have their backs, no matter what." The room filled with a quiet determination as everyone silently agreed. Though they couldn't be with their friends on the front lines, they would stand ready to support them however they could. For now, all they could do was wait and hope. The moment of camaraderie shattered as a sudden, blinding beam of blue light appeared outside the common room window, blazing upward like a massive, glowing pillar that pierced the sky. The room was bathed in an eerie, electric hue, and the students froze, their expressions twisting from confusion to alarm. "What the hell is that?" Mineta shrieked, pointing to the window, his voice trembling with panic. "Everyone, move. Outside, now." Ida commanded, his arms slicing through the air as he motioned toward the door. Without hesitation, the entire class bolted for the entrance, their instincts kicking in. As they raced out into the open, they were greeted by an unsettling sight. More glowing blue pillars of light began appearing across the UA campus, illuminating the night like ominous beacons. Todoroki's breath caught as his dual-colored eyes darted from pillar to pillar. "Is it Shiketsu again?" "Already," he exclaimed, his voice tinged with disbelief. Before anyone could respond, the nearest pillar of light began to flicker, the brilliant glow dimming as something emerged from its core. Slowly, as the radiance faded away, the figure became clearer, a tall teen around their age, clad in the distinctive Shiketsu uniform. However, unlike the typical attire, his had notable differences. He lacked the signature hat, but instead wore a flowing black cape draped over his right shoulder. At his left hip, a long, gleaming sword rested in its sheath, its design elegant yet deadly. The figure stepped forward with a deliberate, almost regal gait. His long blonde hair fell to his shoulders, framing a sharp, chiseled face. His expression was unnervingly calm, devoid of emotion, and his icy blue eyes carried a cold, calculating intensity that made the students shudder. "Greetings, students of Class 1A, he said in a low, even tone that carried an air of authority. His hand moved to the hilt of his sword, and with a smooth motion, he drew it. The blade gleamed under the light of the remaining pillars. "The stern Ritter have come to purge you." Ida stepped forward, his posture firm despite the growing unease in the air. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady but edged with urgency. The blonde teen's gaze shifted to Ida, his movements slow and deliberate. He stopped a few paces away, his sword resting loosely in his hand, though his presence alone was suffocating. "I am Stern Ritter B, the Balance, Jugram Hashwolf," he announced, his voice carrying a chilling sense of finality. "I serve as His Majesty's second-in-command." "His Majesty." Kirishima repeated, his tone laced with confusion as he furrowed his brows. "He's talking about that Conqueror guy," Todoroki muttered, his voice sharp, though his usual calm demeanor couldn't fully mask the growing tension. Jugram nodded in affirmation, his cold gaze sweeping over the group. "Indeed, I refer to His Majesty," he said, his voice as steady as stone. "As of this moment, His Majesty and my fellow Sternritters are laying waste to your precious school." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them seemed to tremble as a distant explosion echoed through the air, not far from their location. The sound was accompanied by faint screams and the clash of battle, proof that chaos had already erupted within UA's borders. "BSTRD," Todoroki hissed through gritted teeth, his fists clenching as steam and frost began to swirl around him. Jugram's sharp, calculating eyes turned to Todoroki and then to Kirishima. "The special war potentials Shoto Todoroki and Eijiro Kirishima," he said, his tone calm but laced with an unsettling authority. It seems two of you are present here, though I don't see Katsuki Bakugu or Momo Yaoyorozu. As His Majesty predicted, Bakugu must have led a counterattack against us. The air seemed to grow colder at his words, a sinking dread settling over the group. Wait a second. Sato stammered, his voice rising in panic. You mean to tell us you knew Bakugu would try to attack you guys after what you pulled yesterday? Jugram's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. Of course, he said. Bakugu Katsuki is nothing if not predictable. Brash, impulsive, driven by pride. It was inevitable that he would attempt to strike back after the events of yesterday. He paused, his expression darkening slightly. Right now, he and his group are likely clashing with Quilge at Shiketsu High. If all has gone as planned, they should already be trapped within his impenetrable cage. The weight of Jugram's words hit them like a brick. Fear rippled through the group as they exchanged worried glances. Trapped. Ochiko's voice wavered, her hands unconsciously curling into fists at her sides. You're saying Bakugu and the others are stuck over there? It works perfectly for us, Jugram continued, ignoring the rising tension among the students. With two war potentials removed from the equation and the others distracted, UA is left vulnerable. His Majesty's victory is all but assured. Like hell it is. Kirishima shouted, stepping forward with his hands clenched into fists, his hardening quirk already coating his arms in jagged rock. You think you can just show up, trash our school, and act like it's over? Jugram's cold, unwavering gaze remained fixed on them as he spoke with absolute certainty. Yes, he repeated, his voice as steady as ever. Because soon it will be. A spark of fury ignited in Kirishima's chest, his hands clenching into trembling fists. The weight of Jugram's words, the casual way he spoke of their impending defeat, was too much to bear. With a fierce growl, red lightning crackled around his body as he activated full cowling, his muscles tensing before he launched himself forward at breakneck speed. In an instant, Kirishima became nothing but a crimson blur, closing the distance between himself and Jugram in the blink of an eye. The sheer force of his charge sent dust and debris flying as he prepared to land a devastating blow. But Jugram did not move. He didn't flinch. He didn't react. He merely stood there, watching with cold amusement. So brash of you, Eijiro Kirishima, he said flatly. And then, without warning bam. An unseen force slammed into Kirishima's stomach like a sledgehammer, the impact so brutal that his charge was halted instantly. His breath was torn from his lungs as he was violently hurled backward, his body flipping through the air before crashing into the ground with a bone-rattling thud. Kirishima. Mineta yelped, eyes wide in horror as their classmate tumbled across the pavement before landing in a painful heap in front of them. What the hell just happened? Jairu stammered, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Kirishima groaned as he pushed himself up onto his hands, pain radiating through his torso. He had hit something but there had been nothing there. He had been so sure his punch would land, yet somehow, the force had rebounded back onto him. Jugram exhaled quietly, his grip tightening slightly around his sword as he turned his gaze back to them. I am Sternritter B, the balance, he stated once again, his voice void of emotion. I hold dominion over the scales of fortune and misfortune. Any harm you attempt to inflict upon me will be reversed and returned to you. That is the fate of all who dare to oppose me. The chilling certainty in his tone sent a shiver through the group. Kirishima gritted his teeth, his fingers digging into the ground as he forced himself to stand. His hardened arms trembled slightly from the pain, but he refused to back down. Dmn it, he muttered under his breath. Jugram regarded him for a moment before his gaze swept over the rest of Class 1A, his ice-blue eyes devoid of pity or mercy. This is the end for you all, he said simply, his tone as final as a death sentence. Welcome to your downfall, Class 1A, and with those words, he raised his sword. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX across one side of the crumbling UA campus, chaos reigned. Smoke billowed in the distance, the echoes of battle and destruction ringing through the air. However, amidst the turmoil, Hitoshi Shinso stood firm, his sharp violet eyes locked onto the figure before him. A handful of his fellow general studies students lay groaning on the ground behind him, battered and barely able to move. Their attacker, a Shiketsu student, remained perfectly composed, standing with an air of superiority. This student wore the signature Shiketsu hat, though it did little to conceal his distinct purple hair. His fringe swept over his left eye, while the back of his head sported tufts of fluffier strands sticking out in small spikes. His posture was rigid, disciplined, yet his smirk held an unmistakable condescension. Shinso narrowed his eyes, breaking the tense silence. "You must be one of those Shiketsu punks, huh?" he muttered, his tone dripping with disinterest, though his mind was already racing with strategy. The student gave a slow, approving nod. "You are correct," he replied, voice smooth yet eerily emotionless. "I am Stern Ritter M, the meatball, Seiji Shishikura." Shinso scoffed, raising a brow. "Stern Ritter. Sounds fancy," he remarked lazily. "So what, you guys have cool little codenames now. Real original." Seiji remained unfazed. He simply adjusted his hat, his movements precise and calculated. "His Majesty has commanded us to eradicate UA, he stated flatly. "And all those who reside within it, including you, Shinso Hitoshi." At the mention of his name, Shinso stiffened slightly. His eyes flickered with surprise before quickly masking it with nonchalance. "So you know me, huh?" he mused, crossing his arms. Seiji's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "Of course. His Majesty has compiled data on every individual within UA, especially those with noteworthy quirks," he explained. "While you may not be classified as a special war potential, your quirk alone places you dangerously close to such a designation." That was unexpected. Shinso exhaled, shaking his head. "Huh. Ain't that something," he muttered. A part of him couldn't help but feel a strange sense of validation. He'd spent years struggling for recognition, proving he belonged alongside the hero course. Now, the enemy considered him a threat. That was new. But he wasn't about to let it distract him. "You know my quirk," he continued, his gaze sharpening. "Which begs the question, why are you answering me?" For the first time, Seiji's smirk widened into something more unsettling. His single visible eye gleamed with amusement. "Simple," he said. "Who said this is me?" Shinso's mind raced, his confusion morphing into shock as the Seiji before him began to shimmer and distort. His form flickered like a mirage, the contours of his body shifting, breaking apart into wisps of glittering smoke before vanishing entirely. In his place now stood a new figure, a girl clad in a sleek, all-black skin-tight catsuit that hugged her frame. A Shiketsu hat sat tilted atop her light brown hair, which framed her face in soft, playful waves. Her eyes gleamed with amusement, and her lips curled into an easygoing smile. As Shinso stared, a thin wisp of shimmering, golden smoke slithered from her mouth, curling into the air before taking form, an exact replica of her own head, floating beside her like an eerie specter. The illusionary head blinked, then grinned. "Yo. What up, fam?" "The real name's Kami Utsushimi," the disembodied head said in an upbeat, casual tone. "And I'm Stern Ritter I, the illusion." The floating duplicate let out a giggle before bursting into tiny flecks of golden dust, dissolving into the air. Shinso let out a long sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. He was already exhausted, and now he had to deal with this. "Ugh, this is gonna leave a rotten taste in my mouth," he muttered. His eyes flickered toward Kami, who was still smiling like this was all some big joke. "I don't like fighting women, but that old man would be sad if I held back just 'cause you're a girl." Kami's smile widened. She tilted her head, her fingers playfully adjusting her Shiketsu hat as another head was created. "Ah, that's sweet, brainwash boy," the fake teased. "But I really wouldn't worry about that if I were you." Before Shinso could react, the ground beneath him warped, his entire surroundings melting away like paint dripping off a canvas. The battlefield was gone, replaced by a swirling, disorienting void of colors and shifting shadows. A dozen kamis now stood around him, identical smirks on their faces. "'Cause between you and me, babe, this fight. It's already over, XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The tension in the air was suffocating. The students of Class 1B stood firm, their bodies tense as they stared down not one, not two, but four members of the enemy faction. Standing at the forefront, a tall, broad-shouldered boy with wild eyes and an untamed energy practically radiating off of him took a bold step forward. His red hero costume billowed slightly from the sheer force of his presence, his oversized right hand clenching into a fist. Perched atop his head was the unmistakable Shiketsu hat, sitting proudly as he grinned down at the gathered students. "Greetings, students of Class 1B, and to you as well, Vlad King. We are the Stern Ritter." His voice echoed through the training grounds like a force of nature itself. He slammed his enlarged hand into his chest with pride. "I am Stern Ritter W, the Wind. Inasa Yurashi." Beside him, an equally intimidating figure took center stage. Unlike Inasa, this man was clearly no student. His enormous, muscular frame was nearly twice the size of an average man. His costume was dramatic, a star emblem shining across his broad chest, and a gleaming wrestling mask covered his face, leaving only his piercing eyes visible. He threw his arms out wide, striking an extravagant pose. "I am Stern Ritter S, the superstar." Masked masculine, he bellowed, his deep voice carrying a theatrical bravado. "The brightest star of His Majesty's grand vision." A chilling presence followed next. The third figure was none other than Seiji Shishikura, his pristine Shiketsu uniform standing in stark contrast to the disgusted glint in his eyes. His lip curled in disgust as he adjusted his hat, his expression filled with contempt. Finally, the fourth and final Stern Ritter took a slow, deliberate step forward. Unlike the others, his presence was silent, yet no less terrifying. His Shiketsu uniform lacked a hat, leaving his long black hair free to frame his pale, almost corpse-like face. A black mask covered the lower half of his mouth, adorned with menacing metal spikes running down the center, each one shrinking in size as they descended toward his chin. His ice-blue eyes were cold, devoid of humanity. When he spoke, his voice was a whisper, a ghostly murmur that sent shivers down the spines of every 1B student. "I am Stern Ritter F, the fear is not," he uttered, his breath barely more than a chilling breeze against the air. Class 1B tensed, some stepping back instinctively. Even Vlad King narrowed his eyes, immediately recognizing the dangerous aura radiating from each of these enemies. But he wasn't about to let his students fall here. Before anyone could make a move, Vlad took a protective step forward, shielding his students with his broad stance. His red eyes glowed with determination as he faced the group of Stern Ritter head-on. "If you plan on attacking my students," he declared, "then you'll have to go through me first." A booming laugh echoed through the battlefield as Masked Masculine stepped forward, his enormous frame casting a shadow over the UA teacher. He cracked his knuckles eagerly. "Very well, Vlad King," he roared. "I accept your challenge." The two teachers locked eyes, tension crackling in the space between them. "Masked Masculine, I've heard quite a few things about you," he muttered. The masked wrestler's grin widened beneath his mask, his gleaming eyes flashing with excitement. "And I've heard plenty about you, Vlad King," he declared, slamming his fists together with a loud boom. "Let us have a good fight." The battlefield erupted into chaos the moment Masked Masculine and Vlad King clashed. The two men stood just a foot apart, their eyes locked in an unspoken challenge. Mask loomed over Vlad, his massive frame casting a shadow over the BLD manipulating hero. The air between them crackled with tension. Without a word, Mask pulled his fist back, his bicep bulging as he prepared to strike. But it wasn't enough. Mask's punch connected with Vlad's shield with earth-shattering force. A thunderous crack echoed through the air as the shield shattered instantly, crimson shards flying in all directions. The sheer impact sent Vlad hurtling backward like a ragdoll, his body crashing through the air before disappearing into the distance. Itsuka gasped, her eyes widening in horror as she watched her teacher be flung away like he weighed nothing. "Sensei," she cried out desperately, reaching out even though she knew she couldn't do anything to stop it. Mask let out a booming laugh, seemingly pleased with himself. His body tensed before he launched himself into the air, effortlessly soaring in the direction where he had sent Vlad flying. His massive frame arced high above the battlefield, passing over the students of Class 1B as if they were mere spectators. But they weren't just spectators. The moment Mask was gone, the three remaining Sternritter wasted no time in making their presence known. Inasa grinned wildly as he swung his arm in a wide arc, his movements fluid yet incredibly powerful. The air responded instantly. A roaring gust of wind shot forward like a hurricane, tearing through the battlefield with terrifying speed. Kinoko, Manga, Kojiro, and Pony had no time to react before the violent wind slammed into them, their bodies lifting off the ground as if they were weightless. They were flung backward like leaves in a storm, each of them crashing hard into a nearby building. Tetsu watched in shock as his classmates were tossed around like ragdolls. "Guys," he shouted, his voice filled with panic. But there was no time to process the situation. Before anyone could regroup, something grotesque and unnatural lashed through the air. Seiji moved with eerie precision, his fingers twitching ever so slightly. Without warning, masses of flesh shot forward, twisting and writhing as they snaked toward their targets. Reiko, Ibara, and Toguro barely had a chance to react before the grotesque blobs of flesh collided with them. The moment the flesh touched their bodies, it expanded and enveloped them, before contorting and twisting their forms into small grotesque, misshapen orbs of meat. The remaining students froze, their eyes locked onto their transformed classmates in sheer horror. "What the hell?" Senkaibara muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Before they could even recover from the shock, another attack came. Without a word or warning, a barrage of small metallic spikes shot through the air. The spikes gleamed under the light, moving so fast they were nothing more than a blur. Asnat had finally joined the battle. His cold, empty eyes watched as his attack rained down upon the remaining Class 1B students. There was no emotion. No malice. Just inevitability. The moment the metallic spikes made contact with their flesh, Yui Kodai, Senkaibara, Jirota Shishida, and Hiryu Rin collapsed to their knees, their faces contorted in pure, unfiltered terror. A bone-chilling scream tore from their throats, the sound raw and agonized, as if they were witnessing something beyond comprehension, something that clawed at their very souls. Their hands clutched at their heads, their bodies trembling violently, eyes wide and unfocused, pupils dilated in sheer horror. What the hell is happening to them? Setsuna Tokage cried, her voice laced with both shock and fear. She could barely keep her hands from shaking as she watched her classmates writhing in agony. Why are they screaming like that? Itsuka Kendo stood frozen for a split second, unable to tear her eyes away from the horrifying sight. Her heart pounded in her chest as a sickening realization sank in. Most of her friends had been taken down in an instant. First, the ones hit by Seiji's flesh manipulation, and now whatever nightmare Asnat had inflicted upon them. They were losing. Badly. But she couldn't allow herself to break now. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to push past the dread creeping into her bones, and turned her glare toward the three remaining Sternritters. We can't fight them like this, she thought, desperately trying to form a plan. If they stayed, they'd all be wiped out. Before she could say anything, Setsuna turned to her, eyes pleading but determined. "Big sis, what do we do?" Itsuka inhaled sharply, her mind racing before she made a split-second decision. She turned back to the remaining conscious students and barked out orders. "Monoma, grab who you can and get everyone else out of here," she commanded. "I, Tetsu, and Setsuna will hold them off." Monoma's head snapped toward her, his expression twisting into shock. Then, almost instantly, his eyes narrowed in frustration. "No way," he snapped, his voice heated. I am not leaving you three here to hog all the glory. I'm Nito. Itsuka's voice rang through the battlefield, cutting through the chaos. Monoma froze. She never called him by his first name. Slowly, he turned to face her again, and what he saw sent a cold chill down his spine. Her expression was fierce, yet beneath it, there was fear. Not for herself but for them. I'm leaving them in your care, she said, her voice quieter now but firm, unwavering. Understood. Monoma's breath hitched as the weight of realization sank deep into his chest. He had always known Itsuka Kendo to be fearless, unyielding in the face of danger, a leader who stood firm no matter how bad the odds seemed. But this was different. Her clenched fists, the way her jaw tightened as she stood tall, ready to fight, he recognized it now. She wasn't planning on winning. She was planning on stalling. A desperate attempt to buy them time that would come at the cost of her, Tetsu, and Setsuna throwing themselves into a battle they knew they couldn't win. A sharp, cold pang of worry filled his heart. This wasn't bravery. This was resignation. And he hated it. Monoma gritted his teeth as his hands clenched into trembling fists at his sides. DMN it, Itsuka, but he had no choice. His expression hardened as he whirled around to face the remaining conscious students himself, Shirhei Kurwaro, Koziai Tsuburaba, Juzo Hananuki, and the barely conscious Hiryu Rin. You heard her. Monoma shouted, voice sharp and commanding. Grab who you can and move. We're getting out of here. Juzo's head snapped toward him, his face etched with shock. Wait, what? Monoma, you can't be serious. Monoma's body tensed as frustration surged through him. You heard Itsuka, he barked, cutting Juzo off. This is her plan, and we have to trust her. His voice cracked slightly at the end, but he didn't care. Juzo hesitated, as he clenched his fists. Every instinct in him screamed to fight alongside his classmates, to help. But the reality was staring him in the face. If they stayed, they'd just be throwing themselves into the slaughter. And Itsuka knew that was why she ordered them to leave. DMN it, Juzo muttered under his breath before finally nodding. The others followed, though their reluctance was clear. One by one, they grabbed their fallen classmates Kinoko, Manga, Kojiro, Pony, Reiko, Ibra, Toguru, and the one struck by the fear spike, supporting them as best they could as they began their retreat. Monoma lingered for a second longer, his feet refusing to move as his gaze flickered back toward Itsuka, Setsuna, and Tetsu. Standing there, facing down the Sternritters like an unshakable wall. He clenched his fists even tighter, nails digging into his palms. You better make it out of this, Kendo, he thought. With one last glance, Monoma turned and ran after his classmates, leading them away. He had to believe in them. But deep down he couldn't shake the sinking feeling in his chest. XXX standing atop the highest point of UA's main building, Izuku Midoriya and Takahiro surveyed the battlefield below. Fires raged, smoke billowed into the evening sky, and the screams of students and heroes alike echoed through the ruined campus. The once proud symbol of heroism, UA High School, was in chaos. Takahiro let out a gleeful laugh, throwing his arms wide as if to embrace the destruction. What a magnificent sight! Truly. This is where UA falls. Its legacy reduced to ash beneath our feet. His voice was filled with exhilaration, his galaxy-like eyes shining with twisted delight. Izuku, standing beside him, adjusted the brim of his Shiketsu cap, his emerald eyes calm and calculating. Indeed, he said evenly. However, the moment the big three arrive, or if heroes like Sir Nightai, Fat Gum, Ryukyu, or Mirko show up, we must withdraw. His voice was composed, but there was a hint of something else, frustration, perhaps. I haven't fully regained my strength yet. Takahiro shot him a smirk, crossing his arms. That's what happens when you push yourself too far. You shouldn't have used your quirk like that. Teleporting all of us here put an unnecessary strain on your body. Izuku chuckled softly, shaking his head. There's no need to worry about me, he replied smoothly. Even in this state there's not a single person here who could defeat me. His smirk was subtle but filled with unwavering confidence. Before Takahiro could respond, a sudden force shifted the air behind them. In an instant, 5 figures landed on the rooftop with precision, their presence commanding. Eraserhead, Present Mike, Midnight, Cementos, and Nizu. The tension thickened as Izuku slowly turned to face them, his expression unfazed, almost amused. His sharp green eyes flickered with recognition as he gazed upon the UA staff, men and women who had once been nothing more than names in a textbook to him. A slow, knowing smile tugged at his lips. Ah, now this is an honor, he said with a mock sense of admiration. Eraserhead, the man who can render quirks useless with a single glance, Present Mike, whose screams can shatter stone, Midnight, MSTR of somnambulant combat, Cementos, the foundation of UA's defenses, and of course, the mind behind it all, Principal Nizu himself. He gave a slight bow, his tone smooth, almost playful. Believe it or not, I'm a big fan of all of you. So, finally standing here, face to face, feels like a dream come true. Aizawa's narrowed gaze never wavered, his posture tense, his fingers already itching toward his capture weapon. His voice was low and edged with quiet fury. You must be the Conqueror, he stated bluntly. Izuku let out a soft chuckle, his smirk never faltering. He gave a slight nod. I am, he confirmed, his voice smooth and unwavering. My name is Izuku Midoriya. Again, it's truly a pleasure to meet you all. The tension in the air was palpable, and Midnight took a step forward, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Was all this you're doing? She asked, her tone laced with barely contained anger. Izuku met her glare with ease, nodding once more. It was, he admitted without hesitation. Everything happening right now, this battle, this chaos, it was my plan. His words were calm, spoken with complete confidence, as if orchestrating the downfall of UA was nothing more than a simple task. Nizu, his small frame still and unreadable, studied the young man before him with sharp, calculating eyes. Then I must assume that you're the one leading these students, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Every one of these so-called stern ritter, they follow you. Izuku straightened slightly, his green eyes gleaming with something dangerous. I do, he answered, taking pride in his words. They are under my command, and they follow my orders. Please understand, I hold no personal grudge against you, Principal Nizu, or against most of the faculty here. However, there are 2 people here who I do hold a deep grudge against. Aizawa's gaze sharpened, already trying to decipher Izuku's words. Izuku's tone took on a cruel edge. And when I learned that my allies were planning to go to war with the very school that they resided in, well, how could I possibly resist? His smirk widened, but his voice carried venom. I would have been a fool to let this opportunity pass me by. Aizawa's grip on his capture weapon tightened. So all of this, he said, his voice quiet but firm, the reason you agreed to participate in this insane, twisted battle that the HPSC devised, it's all over something as petty as revenge. For the first time since the conversation started, Izuku's expression twisted, his smirk dropping into something colder, darker. His fists clenched at his sides. Petty. Izuku repeated, his tone dripping with restrained fury. You think my revenge is petty? Aizawa could feel the shift in the air, as if the very rooftop itself had become heavier. Izuku took a slow step forward, his emerald eyes burning. No, my revenge is justified. Not that I expect any of you to understand. He exhaled sharply, his fingers twitching slightly. After all, you all stand by and worship a man who crushed my dreams, who destroyed everything I ever wanted. And not only that, but you welcomed Katsuki Bakugo into this school with open arms, despite the years of pain and suffering he inflicted on me. His voice rose, his composure breaking ever so slightly as the anger bled through his words. Aizawa's eyes narrowed as his mind raced to process what he was hearing. He's furious just from mentioning Bakuga's name, he realized. What the hell happened between them? The Erasure hero studied Izuku carefully, watching the way his body tensed, the way his breathing was steady but just a little too sharp. Izuku let out a breath, composing himself once more. The smirk returned, but this time, it didn't reach his eyes. I don't expect you to understand, but it doesn't matter. Because by the time this night is over, he said, his voice once again smooth, controlled. He turned his gaze toward the battlefield below, where you continued to crumble. I'll make sure you never forget. Nizu's expression remained unreadable, but his tone was unwavering. Then if you are the one leading this assault, the most logical course of action would be to eliminate you here and now. Izuku let out a light chuckle, tipping his Shiketsu cap slightly as he smirked. You can try, he replied with amusement lacing his voice, but I'm afraid all your efforts will amount to nothing. His emerald eyes gleamed with confidence as he took a step forward. Present Mike narrowed his eyes. Let's put that to the test, then, he shouted, inhaling deeply before unleashing a deafening scream. Yeah. The sheer force of his voice tore through the air, a concentrated blast of sound waves rushing toward Izuku and Takahiro like a tidal wave. Takahiro's eyes widened in alarm. TCHDMN loud BSTRD. He quickly covered his ears and leaped back, avoiding the brunt of the attack. Yet, while the force of the sonic attack rattled the very rooftop and sent nearby debris flying, Izuku remained standing. He did not flinch, did not waver, he simply stood still, his smirk unwavering. The shockwave of Present Mix yell struck him directly, yet he did not budge. It was as if the attack had no effect on him whatsoever. Present Mix's voice finally died down as he took a breath, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. But as the dust settled, his eyes widened in shock. Izuku was still standing. Completely unscathed. He took a slow step forward, his expression still calm, still amused. Allow me to introduce myself properly, Izuku began, his voice smooth yet carrying an undeniable weight. He placed a hand over his chest and slightly bowed his head. I am the Conqueror of Shiketsu, leader of the Stern Ritter, and one of their strongest. I am Stern Ritter AA, the almighty antithesis, Izuku Midoriya. His smirk widened as his eyes gleamed with an eerie glow. A sudden shift in the atmosphere made the air feel thicker, heavier, as if an unseen force was pressing down on the rooftop. Then, without warning, Izuku vanished. In the blink of an eye, he reappeared in front of the teachers, his fist pulled back, glowing with swirling, ominous energy. He lunged forward, his punch tearing through the air with raw, destructive force. Nizu's eyes widened. Move, he shouted. The teachers barely had time to react before boom. A powerful shockwave erupted as Izuku's fist collided with another. The sheer force of the impact sent a violent gust outward, causing the glass windows of the main U building below them to shatter instantly. The entire rooftop trembled from the clash, as if a small-scale earthquake had struck the area. The battlefield stood still, as if time itself had paused for a moment. Every pair of eyes, from Izuku's calculating gaze to the stunned expressions of the U staff, were locked onto the figure who had stopped the devastating blow. Stepping forward from the lingering dust, clad in a sleek, mechanical power suit, was none other than Yagi Toshinori. Though his once muscular physique was long gone, the suit had been crafted to perfectly resemble his former self: broad shoulders, chiseled frame, and his unmistakable bright blue eyes. A proud, beaming smile stretched across his face, one that had once symbolized hope for an entire generation. Toshinori, right on time, Nizu said softly, a rare look of relief crossing his usually unreadable features. Izuku's expression shifted immediately. His once smug smirk twisted into something darker, his emerald eyes narrowing, lips curling back into a snarl. All might, he seethed, stepping back from the former #1 hero, his fists trembling slightly, though not from fear but from pure, unfiltered rage. All Might didn't respond at first. Instead, he turned his gaze toward his fellow staff members, his smile unwavering. His voice rang out, filled with strength and confidence, as if nothing had changed since his prime. There's no need to worry anymore. His body straightened as his voice boomed across the rooftop. Why? Because I am here. The ones that had once inspired millions echoed across the battlefield. Even the destruction below seemed to pause, as if the declaration alone was enough to shift the tide of battle. Izuku, however, merely let out a quiet chuckle. His lips quirked into a grin cold and knowing. That you are, he muttered under his breath. Toshinori exhaled, his mechanical fists tightening as he took a step forward. Please, leave him to me, he told the rest of the faculty, his tone serious. The safety of the students is top priority. Make sure they make it out of this unharmed. Midnight hesitated, her usual confident demeanor faltering as she stared at him with uncertainty. Toshinori, are you sure you can handle this? Aizawa, ever the realist, stepped forward as well, his sharp eyes locking onto his old friend. She's right. You don't have your quirk anymore, Toshinori. His tone wasn't just concern, it was caution. For a brief moment, silence hung in the air. Then, Toshinori let out a deep breath, placing a hand over his chest. I'll be all right, he assured them, his voice carrying the same unshakable conviction it always had. David knew that my time as All Might was coming to an end, and he refused to let that be my last stand. He lifted his arms slightly, allowing them all to take in the intricate design of his battle suit. The metal plating shimmered in the sunlight, seamlessly molding to his form like a second skin. The colors gold, red, and blue matched his old hero costume perfectly. This gift was his way of making sure I could still fight. So that I could still protect this school. My students. His eyes flickered to Izuku, his smile never faltering. It may not be perfect yet, but that won't stop me from being what I was always meant to be. He clenched his fists, shifting into a battle-ready stance. A hero, Izuku stared at him, the fire in his eyes only growing stronger. Then, ever so slowly, his smirk widened. I've been looking forward to this, Izuku said as he rolled his shoulders, cracking his knuckles as dark energy pulsed around him. It's been a long time since we last met, All Might. As the staff members began to disperse, rushing to secure the safety of the remaining students, Toshinori lingered for a moment longer, his eyes narrowing slightly as he regarded Izuku. His voice broke the tension, calm yet curious. I don't believe we've met before, young man, he said, his brow raised in mild confusion, as though trying to place the face before him. Izuku's body stiffened at the words, an involuntary reaction. For just a moment, the weight of Toshinori's gaze seemed to press against him, but he quickly relaxed. A bitter chuckle escaped his lips, and with a flick of his wrist, he tossed his Shiketsu cap aside. I suppose you would forget, Izuku began, his tone darkening as he met Toshinori's eyes. After all, his lips curled into a sardonic smile, his words cutting through the air like a blade. A quirkless kid like me has no chance of becoming a hero. Toshinori's eyes tracked the movement of the cap, his mind racing as he processed the words. His gaze sharpened, and it was then that he took in Izuku's full appearance, the familiar glint in his eyes. His breath caught in his throat as a realization slammed into him with the force of a freight train. The memory hit him like a bolt of lightning. Can someone without a quirk become a hero? Toshinori's heart skipped a beat as the question reverberated in his mind, the past flooding back with dizzying clarity. His eyes widened with shock. Impossible, he took a step back, a distant ache in his chest beginning to throb as the recognition hit him harder than he anticipated. Young Midoriya. Izuku's smirk deepened, the flicker of satisfaction in his gaze unmistakable. Oh, so you do remember my name, he said, a hint of mockery lacing his words. I'm surprised. Toshinori's expression tightened, his brows knitting together as confusion and disbelief battled for control over his thoughts. How is this possible? You had no quirk. Toshinori's voice faltered as he struggled to process the fact that the young man before him was the same kid from a year ago, the one who had dared to dream of becoming a hero despite being quirkless. You wanted to attend UA, you wanted to be a hero. So why would you agree to this madness? Izuku's face contorted in a flash of fury, his eyes burning with an intensity that was both heartbreaking and terrifying. He clenched his fists at his sides, his voice low and jagged, as if each word was a wound he had carried for far too long. Why? Why? He let out a growl, a guttural sound that vibrated through the air. The venom in his voice was palpable as he took a step forward, his gaze never leaving Toshinori's. Because you and Bakugo crushed my dreams. You left me with nothing but nothing. You stood by, watched as he got everything handed to him. It was because of you, because of all of you, that I was made the laughingstock of Japan. Izuku's voice cracked with raw emotion, his chest heaving with the weight of years spent seething in silence. It was because of you heroes that I was abandoned by everyone. Even my own mother couldn't stand to be around me. She was embarrassed by me. His voice broke, but the pain only fueled his fury further. I was laughed at, mocked, ridiculed. But Bakugo, he spat the name with venom. He was praised. Worshipped. Everyone saw promise in him, despite all the pain he caused me. Izuku's fists trembled with rage as his eyes burned with fury and betrayal. And you know what? I agreed to all of this, every single piece of it, because I wanted nothing more than for you and him to be crushed. His voice dropped to a low, guttural tone. I want to see everything you hold dear shattered. I want to see your worlds crumble before your eyes. His words hung in the air like a challenge, a promise of destruction. Toshinori, unable to react quickly enough, stood frozen for a moment, caught in the storm of emotions Izuku had unleashed. The magnitude of the boy's pain was overwhelming, more than he had anticipated. But the reality of Izuku's feelings, the depth of his anger, was undeniable. Izuku's breathing steadied as the fury within him slowly ebbed, replaced by cold determination. His fists clenched at his sides as his glare locked onto Toshinori, his voice sharp and cutting. I'm glad you chose to face me, he sneered, the words dripping with venom. Now I get to destroy you myself. And when I'm done, I'll make sure Bakugo sees it. I'll show him how his so-called idol, the man he aspired to become, the one he wanted to defeat, ends up beneath my boot. His voice rose with each word, full of wrath and vindication. Toshinori's chest tightened, a sudden, sharp pain coursing through him. The force of Izuku's words hit him like a physical blow, and for a brief moment, the weight of his past mistakes bore down on him. His mind flashed to a memory, one from a year ago, a fleeting meeting with a young Izuku. He could still remember the brightness in his eyes, the hope and excitement that radiated from him. The boy had been so eager, so full of potential, asking questions with a heart full of dreams. A heart full of hope. But Toshinori had crushed that hope. He had denied Izuku the chance to become a hero, the very thing the boy had wanted more than anything. Toshinori had been quirkless once, too, and he understood the pain of being denied a future. But what he had done to Izuku was different. He had taken the boy's dreams and stomped them out, the same way the world had done to him. The weight of his own failures and regret settled over him like a heavy cloud. Toshinori wanted to apologize. He wanted to tell Izuku how deeply sorry he was, how he regretted every moment of crushing the boy's spirit, but he couldn't. Not yet. He couldn't let Izuku destroy UA, couldn't let him hurt the students he had sworn to protect. Toshinori had made mistakes, yes, but he wasn't about to let Izuku's pain drag them all down. In that moment, Toshinori made a choice. He had to stop him. He had to fix what he had done, even if it meant standing against the very person who had once looked up to him. He had to prevent this destruction, this rage, from tearing through everything he had worked to protect. Toshinori straightened, taking a deep breath as he stepped into a fighting stance, ready to confront the young man who had once been his biggest fan. Izuku stood opposite him, his eyes burning with the fire of vengeance, his fists still clenched, prepared to destroy the man who had once been his hero. And after a minute, they charged at each other.